Good morning, everyone. I'm Azadeh Sami, and I'd like to welcome you today on behalf of the Organization of Iranian American Communities. On the eve of President Biden's address to the joint session of Congress, we have several members of the U.S. House of Representatives, including Congressman Tom McClintock and Congressman Brad Sherman, addressing this event with their announcement on the House Resolution 118. We will also hear from other House members, including Congressman Joe Wilson and Congressman Tim Burchett, both from the Foreign Affairs Committee. We also have two messages from two representatives from Texas, Congressman Lance Gooden from Financial Services Committee and Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne from Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Let me just say, on behalf of the 41 chapters of the Iranian American communities across the US, especially Texas and California, with the most number of co-sponsors, we are very proud to host this event and thank every member of Congress who has already co-sponsored this timely and significant bipartisan initiative, which offers the sense of Congress in the first 100 days of the new administration. This resolution welcomes the administration's offer to consult with US Congress when determining Iran policy. With that said, before we hear from members of Congress, I would like to ask Ms. Sona Samsami, the US representative of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, to deliver her message of appreciation to the House members. Ms. Samsami, please.
Hello, everybody. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to thank Congressman Tom McClintock and Congressman Brad Sherman for taking the lead and spearheading such a timely effort. They have set a great precedent when it comes to democracy, human rights, and freedom, and when it comes to countering the Iranian regime threats. Bipartisanship is the key. On behalf of the Iranian people, the Iranian resistance, and on behalf of all those in the region and elsewhere who have suffered from the terrorism and the mayhem of the ruthless rulers of Iran, I want to thank every member of Congress who has joined this valuable resolution. Your noble effort truly represents the people of America in support of the people of Iran. I also want to thank all of the Iranian American community members who worked tirelessly to be the voice of the Iranian people. They made it possible with such a speed, just a little more than 2 months, and now have a House majority as co-sponsors in the first 100 days of the new US administration. This resolution was filed on February 11th with 113 co-sponsors. It reached 158 co-sponsors 3 weeks later, and now has reached 225 bipartisan co-sponsors, including 19 committee chairs and ranking members, and 104 subcommittee chairs and ranking members. This will send a strong message to the people of Iran that the several rounds of uprisings have been taken into account, and that there are calls for accountability for the 1988 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in Iran. The resolution also highlights the Iranian regime threats against the opposition in Albania, for which 4 Iranian diplomats were expelled, and the need to close the Iranian embassies in Europe, especially in Albania. The resolution notes, quote, support for the opposition leader, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran, which calls for the universal rights to vote, free elections, a free market economy, advocates gender, religious, and ethnic equality, a foreign policy based on peaceful coexistence, and a non-nuclear Iran, unquote. And finally, this resolution emphasizes that the solution is based on recognizing the rights of the Iranian people and their struggle to establish a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic of Iran. And once again, I want to thank all the 225 members of the House of Representatives for their support for this resolution. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks so much, Ms. Samsami. I think your words carried the message of all Iranians who wish to see a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. At this point, I'm told that Congressman Tom McClintock from California has joined. Please welcome him, as he has been the lead Republican sponsor of House Resolution 118 and a dear and longtime friend of the Iranian people. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Representative Tom McClintock.
Hello, friends. This is Congressman Tom McClintock of California's 4th Congressional District. I join you today very proud of the congressional support for the Iranian people and in opposition to the regime's continued terrorism and human rights abuses. I'm very pleased to announce today that over 222 members of the United States House of Representatives, Republicans and Democrats alike, and a majority of the entire House, have co-sponsored House Resolution 118, expressing support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran, and condemning the violations of human rights and state-sponsored terrorism by the Iranian government. House Resolution 118 delivers a truly urgent message to the Biden administration within its first 100 days, that the Congress urges it to hold Iran's corrupt regime accountable for its crimes against its people and its continued sponsorship of global terrorism. This resolution expresses self-evident truths, not wishful thinking, into the discussion over Iran's conduct against its own people as well as against the peaceful nations of the world. It cites so many instances of human rights abuses and terrorist acts. By so doing, the bipartisan House majority is telling the Iranian people and the world that it stands with the freedom fighters of Iran, and it stands against the tyrannical rulers who have wrecked that country and vexed the Middle East through terrorism and brutality. The Iranian people have repeatedly rejected clerical and monarchical forms of government and aspire to create a secular and democratic republic. Over 120,000 people have been killed during the last 4 decades of struggle against religious tyranny, and countless more were killed in the years prior to the 1979 revolution. The Iranian people have resisted nuclear adventurism. They want a non-nuclear country. It was the Iranian resistance that first exposed the regime's illegal nuclear sites and weapons programs. The Iranian people have time and again demonstrated their commitment through countless sacrifices and over a century of struggle to establishing a secular and representative democracy. With House Resolution 118, a bipartisan House majority recognizes and expresses solidarity with the resilient pro-democracy Iranian citizens who are protesting against religious dictatorship, the suppression of basic human rights, and the mullahs' dangerous nuclear ambitions. The resolution outlines many recent examples of their plight, including the 2018 and 2019 demonstrations in over 160 cities and all of the provinces in Iran. The resolution highlights not only these valiant efforts, but it also condemns the violent suppression of these protests by Iranian security forces, and it urges the United States and its allies to hold the regime accountable. House Resolution 118 details a picture that many in the global community have come to refer to as, quote, an ongoing crime against humanity in Iran, where thousands are regularly and arbitrarily detained, tortured, assaulted, and murdered without due process of law or regards for their God-given inalienable rights. This resolution also describes in no uncertain terms the brutal suppression of ethnic and religious minorities. Our resolution especially condemns the 1988 massacre of over 30,000 political prisoners, and it calls for accountability for this crime. 32 years ago, the Iranian regime waged a brutal campaign of terror and torture. It executed thousands of its citizens or imprisoned them for their opposition to the ruling regime. The so-called Supreme Leader's Death Committee sought out those whose political ideas were regarded as incompatible with the theocratic state and ensured their disappearance. To date, the Iranian government continues to deny this atrocity, and it still frequently calls upon the Revolutionary Guard to wage violence against peaceful protesters and political dissidents, which is why our resolution mentions this massacre and calls for long overdue accountability of the current senior Iranian officials who sanctioned this death committee. Importantly, this resolution calls attention to the Iranian regime's use of diplomatic operations to plan and pursue terrorist plots in Europe, in the Balkans, and beyond. This includes a Belgian court's recent sentencing of one of Iran's diplomatic terrorists, Asadollah Azadi, to the maximum sentence of 20 years in prison for planning to plant a bomb at the Free Iran gathering in Paris in 2018. I know many of you were present in that gathering to support the Iranian resistance movement and to support Mrs. Miriam Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran. The Ayatollah's evil actions know no borders. Here in the United States, our government arrested 2 Iranian nationals in 2018 who pled guilty to conducting covert surveillance in the United States against the Iranian resistance that may have included, quote, apprehension, recruitment, cyber exploitation, or capture and kill operations. What is abundantly clear is that this regime, from its highest levels of power and corruption, has been engaged in undermining treasured diplomatic norms and privileges while pretending to seek diplomatic engagement with the international community. House Resolution 118 marks the overwhelming congressional sentiment that Iranian rulers must be held accountable for their reprehensible behavior and that the United States must pursue a clear-eyed and fact-based policy approach in dealing with the Ayatollahs. The dictators in Iran are not content with just persecuting their dissidents at home. They're also committing crimes against humanity, supporting terrorists across the globe, and even using their diplomats to plant bombs. They've dared to employ active terrorists here in the United States. Evidence and recent arrests suggest that they still have countless agents operating here in America. So how can we ensure safety for our citizens and fully address the regime's nuclear ambitions without confronting the 2 pillars of Islamic fundamentalism that the mullahs use the most, terror against their own people and terror against the international community? Both of these atrocities are addressed in House Resolution 118 because Iran's rulers have always used them to undermine freedom, violate human rights, and blackmail the free world to stay in power. The result of the mullahs' policies has been the perpetual carnage in Iran and in the Middle East, and more time for the mullahs to build their nuclear weapons, an additional arsenal used to blackmail and terrorize the free world. Having noted the contents of the resolution, I think it would be instructive for me to close by reciting its final section. This is what it says: Resolved, that the House of Representatives, 1, condemns past and present Iranian state-sponsored terrorist attacks against United States citizens and officials, as well as Iranian dissidents, including the Iran regime's terror plot against the Free Iran 2018, the alternative, gathering in Paris. 2, calls on relevant United States government agencies to work with European allies, including those in the Balkans where Iran has expanded its presence, to hold Iran accountable for breaching diplomatic privileges, and to call on nations to prevent the malign activities of the Iranian regime's diplomatic missions, with the goal of closing them down. 3, that we stand with the people of Iran who are continuing to hold legitimate and peaceful protests against the oppressive and corrupt regime. And 4, recognizes the rights of the Iranian people in their struggle to establish a secular, democratic, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. Thank you all for the heroic fight that you are waging for the freedom of Iran and the freedom of people around the world. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Representative McClintock, as you closed your remarks with reciting the final section of the resolution, which says, Congress is resolved and recognizes the rights of the Iranian people and their struggle to establish a secular, democratic, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. Thank you so much indeed. We are now going to hear from Congressman Brad Sherman, a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee from California. Representative Sherman is the lead Democrat sponsor on House Resolution 118. Over the years, we have seen how he has taken the principled approach on the US policy on Iran, rising above partisanship and helping both Democrats and Republican administrations to adopt a policy that is aligned with the desire of the Iranian people for freedom and democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Representative Brad Sherman from California.
Hello, I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. Iran is a culture that goes back well over 4,000 years. It gave the world the first human rights document, the Cyrus Cylinder. So it's a travesty that Iranians continue to live under an oppressive, undemocratic regime, a regime that murders its own people and uses international aggression to distract its people from the regime's venal corruption. This must end. I'm the chief Democratic sponsor of House Resolution 118, expressing support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear Republic of Iran, and condemning violations of human rights and state-sponsored terrorism by the Iranian government. H.Res 118 highlights the recent arrest of an Iranian diplomat in Belgium for his role in conspiring to commit murder as part of a plot to bomb the Free Iran gathering in Paris in 2018. His conviction demonstrates the willingness of the regime to use its diplomats and its embassies to commit acts of terror around the world, particularly against United States citizens and officials and Iranian people. I have been dedicated to helping those who are trying to achieve democracy in Iran, whether it be meetings with the Prime Minister of Albania to make sure that Iranian exiles there are protected, or whether it be to fight against the hostage-taking by the Iranian regime. I spoke at the Free Iran rally outside the State Department in 2019 to stand in solidarity with the brave Iranians fighting for a new chapter in Iran's long history. In November of 2019, some 1,500 people were killed during 2 weeks of unrest, and thousands more were detained during these protests for democracy. According to a September 2nd, 2020 Amnesty International report, the detained protesters were subject to widespread torture, including beatings, floggings, electric shock, stress positions, mock executions, waterboarding, sexual violence, forced administration of chemical substances, and a deprivation of medical care. Last Congress, the House of Representatives passed House Resolution 752, supporting the rights of the people of Iran to free expression and condemning the Iranian regime for its crackdown on legitimate protests. The Iranian regime has also arbitrarily and brutally suppressed ethnic and religious minorities, including Iranian Kurds, Baluchis, Arabs, as well as Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Zoroastrians, and even Sunni Muslims. The regime has deprived them of their basic human rights solely because of their ethnicity or their beliefs. H.Res 118 calls for the United Nations Security Council to work with the U.S. and partners and allies to condemn the ongoing human rights violations perpetrated by the Iranian regime and establish a mechanism by which the United Nations Security Council can monitor human rights violations. I also want to mention the important work of Madam Rajavi to promote democracy, women's rights, and minority rights in Iran. Democracy and equality are not just principles we hold dear, they are rights that belong to people, and we hold that these rights belong to the people of Iran. We are all familiar with the Iranian government's support for terrorism. Iran supports the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and that's just the terrorist organizations that begin with the letter H. President Obama, President Trump, and now the Biden administration have identified Iran as the #1 state sponsor of terror, a leading force behind Assad's murders in Syria. H.Res 118 condemns Iran's state-sponsored terrorism at home and abroad and recognizes the rights of the Iranian people and their struggle to establish a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. H.Res 118 already has 222 bipartisan co-sponsors, and we're counting. I'm honored to be the chief Democratic proponent of that resolution. With such overwhelming support, Congress sends a strong message to Iran that the United States does not tolerate the ongoing human rights violations perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Thank you for your work to bring freedom, democracy, and liberty to the people of Iran. Thank you very much. I'm Congressman.
Indeed, Representative Sherman, thank you very much. As you said, with such an overwhelming support, the majority of US Congress sends a strong message to Iran that the United States does not tolerate the ongoing human rights violations by the regime in Tehran. Thank you again. Our next member of Congress is Congressman Joe Wilson from South Carolina. Representative Wilson is a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Subcommittee on Middle East, North Africa, and Global Terrorism. He has been a great friend of the Iranian American community of Tennessee. Please welcome Representative Wilson.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Congressman Joe Wilson, representing the 2nd District of the state of South Carolina in Congress. I serve as the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism. I join you to congratulate you on your tremendous efforts to support House Resolution 118. It is critical to hold the Iranian regime accountable for its oppression of its citizens, human rights violations against its citizens, support for terrorism, and nuclear weapons development. I was grateful to co-sponsor this important legislation in support of the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Iran. Additionally, I introduced House Resolution 2117, the Iran Human Rights and Accountability Act, this Congress on the eve of Nowruz. This bill seeks to hold top Iranian officials, including the Supreme Leader, as well as the IRGC interrogators and heads of prisons, accountable for their human rights violations in the region, as well as against the Iranian people. It is unacceptable that Iranian regime continues its brutal suppression of its own people who simply wish for their families to live in peace and prosperity. I am grateful to support the Republican Study Committee Chairman, Jim Banks, for his introduction of the Maximum Pressure Act, which was inspired by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's 12 demands. It is unacceptable to consider lifting sanctions and negotiating an agreement with Iran when it continues to wreak havoc in the region against its citizens and supporting terrorism in conflict zones and against American allies throughout the region. I am grateful for the Iranian American community and thank you for your friendship. I cherish the success of Iranian Americans who are so appreciated as a symbol of freedom and democracy in the United States and around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative Wilson, for recognizing the hard work that has gone into making this majority happen in the United States House of Representatives. Human rights violations in Iran are, as you said, unacceptable. Our next member of Congress is Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee. Representative Burchett is a member of Foreign Affairs Committee, Subcommittee on Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism, and Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, Central Asia, and Non-Proliferation. He has been a great friend of the Iranian American community of Tennessee. Please welcome Representative Burchett.
Hey everybody, it's Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District. I want you to know that I support a free and democratic government in Iran. The Iranian government cannot be trusted. They're more focused on controlling citizens than they are governing. The current regime sponsors terrorism, they oppress their citizens, and the Iranian citizens deserve some of these basic human rights that we love here in America. We need to support the Iranians' effort to stand up to this horrible tyranny. Iran must end their aggressive behavior throughout the world, escalating tensions in Yemen and Iraq, the Levant, and the Gulf. It's completely unacceptable, folks. I'm committed to deterring that regime, its hostile activities, and I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you so much for your commitment and continued support, Representative Burchett. And as you said, the regime in Iran cannot be trusted and must be held accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, we have two messages from members of Congress from Texas. First, we have a message from Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne from the 24th District of Texas. Proud to be a co-sponsor of H.Res 118, which supports Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear government. This resolution also condemns Iran's state-sponsored terrorism and human rights violations. The Iranian people deserve freedom. It is time we stand up for them. Representative Van Dyne. We really do appreciate your support. Next, we have a message from Representative Lance Gooden, a member of the House who has actually met the people of Ashraf 3 and has directly spoken to the victims of human rights violations in Iran and those on the forefront fighting for a free Iran. For over 4 decades, the people of Iran have suffered under the brutality of an Ayatollah. I have co-sponsored H.Res 118, supporting those in Iran who wish to be free from tyranny. All people deserve the opportunity to live freely and prosper under a duly elected government. Congressman Lance Gooden. Thank you very much, Congressman Gooden. Your support means a great deal to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard from members of the House from both parties, the message for a non-nuclear, secular Republic of Iran is what brings all of us together. The new administration has invited the Congress to provide consultation on U.S.-Iran policy. House Resolution 118 is now on the record with the sense of Congress in the first 100 days of the new administration, and we call on the President to stand with the people of Iran, their call for a free Iran, and we are very proud that bipartisan majority from the U.S. House of Representatives stands with us. At this point, I am pleased to introduce Ms. Zahra Amanpour, one of the leaders of the Iranian American community from New Jersey. She has been advocating the issue of human rights, women's rights, and democracy in Iran for years. Please welcome Ms. Zahra Amanpour.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zahra Amanpour, and I am speaking on behalf of 43 chapters of Iranian American communities all across the United States. Our special thanks go to Representatives Tom McClintock and Brad Sherman, the bipartisan lead sponsors of House Resolution 118. We are very proud to see the first bipartisan resolution in support of the people of Iran, with majority support within the first 100 days of the new administration. The outpouring support for this resolution is a testament to the countless brave souls who have sacrificed their lives in Iran. Those 1,500 who were gunned down in various cities across Iran in 2019. Those 30,000 political prisoners who were massacred in the summer of 1988. And those who are languishing in Iranian prisons and are being tortured as we speak. Iranian Americans came together to be a voice for the voiceless in Iran. They portrayed the realities and horrors of what is endured in Iran and shared the stories they have heard firsthand from their family members, friends, and the opposition forces in Iran with their members of Congress. Today, we can see what can happen when the truth is revealed. This is the culmination of thousands of hours of work by Iranian Americans, reaching out to our members in local offices and in Washington, D.C., and simply sharing the message of the Iranian people and their call for a free Iran. We did it by simply relying on the power of truth, which is far more powerful than lies. Lies that the Iranian regime sponsors and lobbies for only to prolong the rule of the Ayatollahs in Iran. In achieving this great success, we had the support of every Iranian ethnic group. Leaders and members of the many religions practiced in Iran joined us to make this possible. We thank you for your solidarity and support. While this does not erase the pain of the many victims of human rights violations and former political prisoners, it does bring forward the real story about our country and loved ones. It is a beacon of hope for a better future for Iran. Our members were victimized by the regime in Tehran, but they are not just victims. They are now empowered community leaders. On a weekly basis, these leaders tirelessly did what was necessary to echo the voice of the Iranian people, demonstrating the connection and solidarity our Iranian American communities have with those in Iran. This campaign has brought some key points to the surface. When it comes to the issue of human rights in Iran, a bipartisan majority of the United States House of Representatives speaks in defense of the Iranian people. When it comes to the threat of terrorism, Democrats and Republicans speak in one voice against the tyrants in Iran. When it comes to the future of Iran, this House majority stands with the people of Iran and their call for a democratic, secular, non-nuclear republic of Iran. This resolution bears witness to grim realities, ongoing crimes against humanity, the unbridled perversion of diplomatic privileges by the regime in Iran, and the desire of a nation for freedom. We therefore call on the U.S. administration to consider the facts therein and heed its call for action. Again, we cannot thank every co-sponsor of the House Resolution 118 enough for standing with the people of Iran. Thank you.
Ms. Amanpour, thank you so much for your powerful words. And as you said, our communities have worked very hard at the local level to make this national level milestone possible. This resolution clearly reflects the voice of bipartisanship across the blue and red states. We thank all of the co-sponsors and members of the House and congratulate the 41 chapters of our communities across the US We thank all of our participants who joined us from all over the United States. This is a huge success for all of us. Thank you again for joining us today, and have a great day, everyone.